Hello, everybody. How you doing? It's the moment you've been waiting for. Erekose, Tracie, and Travis talking about the motion going over to the circuit court today from Kathleen Zellner, as ordered by the Court of Appeals when they remanded it to the circuit court. So, pardon, folks. Don't know why YouTube took away the ability to mute my YouTube window before it starts, but they did, so that's annoying. Anyways, as I was saying, we're here to talk about the motion filed by Kathleen Zellner today in regards to the bones that were in the Manitowoc County gravel pit, about the fact that they are biological evidence and there is statute that protects them from being destroyed or given away or any other such thing, and leading into ultimately the fact that the state was trying to hide what they had done by holding things back, and how that potentially violates Stephen's due process rights, and on and on. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, going into the motion and stuff like that, and looking at Zellner's arguments. A lot of this stuff isn't, those of you who've been following this channel, following Tracie over on Facebook and stuff, what you're going to see in this motion really isn't really new or shocking. It's kind of stuff that's been argued kind of already, or it's, we've seen briefs on it already. So she's basically just going to be, repackaging it here, or reordering it, or whatever you want to call it. And then she adds in a little bit at the end, in terms, showing everybody how much she likes good old Judge Suck at this. So we'll obviously get into that as well. So hi, Tracie. Hi, Travis. How you doing?
Hi. Good.
You're tired after your 2-hour marathon on Facebook, or?
Yeah.
Right on, Trav. Are you there? Uh-oh. Yeah, better get rid of these, bud. We now can't hear you. Oh, there we go. Now I can hear you.
If you have any feedback, because I unplugged the headphones.
I don't hear any.
Okay, good. So just hello, everybody. I don't have YouTube on, so I can't see the live feed. I'm going to be relying on Erekose to capture the questions for Tracie and I. I'm really excited to have Tracie again. She just does such a fantastic job of condensing and explaining the law so well. I was on for most of her lives she did from her Facebook. If y'all aren't there, I would encourage you, if you're interested in the legal aspects of Brendan and Stephen's case, to send an invite. It's invite only, but I don't think she's super strict about who she lets in, as long as you're polite and have manners and
classy, folks. Classy.
Yeah, she's very classy, but she's no nonsense. She focuses on the legal aspects, doesn't really get into the conspiracy stuff. But if you want to know the legal aspects, especially Wisconsin law, I tell you, I've said this over and over and over again, I don't know what I would do without Tracie on these local Wisconsin quirks, their case law. She saved me over and over and over again. Frankly, I wouldn't have the time to dig in and research all of these nuances. But enough of that. I'm so glad Tracie's here and joined you, Erekose. And hello, everybody. I can't see you, but I'm not ignoring you. But I'm looking forward to everybody's questions when we get to it.
Right. So, we can basically just kind of go over roughly what this motion was about. So, it starts out, with her mainly explaining that the state was perpetrating a fraud on the jury with its narrative of things. It's the way she words it, and I think it's I kind of like it. I think it's kind of brilliant, really. Perpetrating a fraud, it's interesting. And she's basically talking about how the fact that they're kind of playing misleading games with the bones, You know, the fact that they couldn't spend 20 seconds on these bones, but there were other bones that were actually found in the Manitowoc gravel pit that were deemed human bones. And a lot of things. So she's pointing out, what's that word we use? Oh yeah, the disingenuousness of the state, basically. So, you know, so it starts out with that and just pointing out how the state's narrative is very flawed and not quite right. And then she talks about how these misrepresentations of the state weren't really caught until recently in 2019 by, you know, those of, you know, web sleuths, a particular web sleuth that decided to make sure that, you know, we sent those pages, what was it, 1,114, 1,115 of queso that talk about them giving the bones back. Well, somebody took it upon themselves and made sure Zellner saw those. I my hat's off to that person, by the way. I figured Zellner would have already seen it, would have already known about it. So I would have totally dropped the ball on that. So kudos to the subscriber, to the supporter of Stephen and Brennan out there that did get that in front of her eyes. So she caught that. You know, so this proves that it's all new, that it just happened and it's happening in a timely manner. And so that's, you know, always part of it, because if you don't do things in a timely manner, you get what, Trav? Procedurally barred.
Procedurally barred.
So, any thoughts on the introduction, you guys, that you want to share that I may have missed?
I've talked enough tonight.
Yeah, so
questions, folks.
yeah, well, yeah, you know, it's I agree. She's repackaged what she's said before. The one thing that is new is the second part of the motion, which is about recusal, which we'll get into as we go along about that part of it. But that factual part that you laid out, you know, she presented the background during Tracie's live. There was a couple of people asking questions, you know, like, why would she argue that the bones were placed in the quarry by Stephen? And there, you know, when you skim through a legal brief of any type, it takes a long time to really, unless you've read through hundreds of them, it takes a while to really go through it and understand. And I think there was some misunderstanding about Kathleen laid out in her motion filed yesterday that what the state's position was at trial. And the reason why she did that is so she could show that it was a central issue in the case. Right. And she's showing that because so that there's no way that the state can try and come in and say, even though they might, well, we didn't know that stuff was important. How the hell didn't you know it was important? You know, it's right here in the petitioner's motion, Stephen Avery's motion, that, you know, in opening, you mentioned the bones. You brought in an expert to talk about the bones, and then in closing, you know, and she laid out the nuggets. But no, she laid out what the state's contentions were at the trial in order to show later on in her motion that there's no way you couldn't have known that these were important.
And also, doesn't she bring up the fact that there was an actual ruling by Judge Willis that evidence should be preserved, and, you know, that sort of thing? I believe it's mentioned in here.
She does. Interesting. You should mention that, because as
you didn't get to watch it live, did you?
I did not. Well, no, sorry.
As longtime subscribers of yours will know, when a significant pleading comes out, ever since I met Tracie, we huddle together in the morning, basically, you know, figuratively, I don't know, literally, have, you know, a little coffee chat about, what'd you think about this? What'd you think about that? And during our little coffee chat this morning, the subject of Tracie said it to me. So, what is she doing about the order? And the order to preserve evidence. And I go, she's going to get hit with both barrels with that one. Tracie, your thoughts? I know it's a repeat, but her
yeah, that was the one thing that really bothered me about this motion. I think it's a great motion, but her constantly bringing up that April 2007 preservation order honestly just drove me insane, because that order is very specific. All you have to do is look at it. It's
very specific evidence, you mean?
Yes,
Right.
that Judge Willis ordered them to preserve any of the blood that contained Steve's DNA that was found in the RAV4 and anything that was sent to the FBI lab for EDTA testing. That was all that was ordered, and it was very clear about that. And yet she keeps bringing it up, and I hate it because she's handing the state a win on a certain point. I don't think she needed it. I don't think she needs it to make her argument. And I don't think you should ever just hand the state a winning argument.
Right.
And the fact that she brings it up so many times, and she says, I can't remember now, I don't have it open now, but I had actually highlighted an entire paragraph that I just was shaking my head at. And I was like, that's not what the order says. It has nothing to do with the bones. Nothing, it does not mean that the bones should have been preserved. It doesn't even suggest the bones should have been preserved. And yet she's like constantly hammering on this. And yeah, like Travis said, she's going to get nailed with that. And the state wouldn't really have a lot to argue against when they file their response, if they file a response. And yet she's giving them something to focus on. And that's what they're going to focus on. They're going to focus on that. And I don't understand the point of handing them something, like I said, a winning bullet point, basically. And so that just drove me crazy. And yeah, I brought it up because every time she brought it up in the motion when I was going through it, I was like, yep, there it is again. And she's saying it like she's misrepresenting what it says.
Right.
And I'm not a fan of that.
I'm not a fan of that. But
and the other thing Tracie mentioned during her live that she forgot about now is that, Tracie, you mentioned that not only is it on specific items, she's also had an opportunity to test all of those items by agreement with the state.
Yep, those are the first thing, because what the agreement says is it says that she can test those items without further order from the court. Because normally, anytime you want to test do any scientific testing, the court has to approve it. Those were items that she would be able to test without needing further approval from the court. And so those were the first things she tested. She did the age testing on the blood, and she tested for EDTA, and she did all those things. So she keeps bringing up an order on things that she already tested and that she was allowed to test. And it just, more importantly, it has nothing to do with the bones, nothing. And she's stating it like it's like it's apparent that they were supposed to preserve everything for future testing, and that is not anything near what it says. And I said I just don't like handing the state a good argument, because
I mean, is it a good argument though for the state? I mean, it seems more like it's moot. And I get it. She shouldn't have mentioned it because it does seem moot, really. It's not, just like you're saying, it doesn't pertain to the bones.
Right.
It doesn't.
She doesn't just bring it up. She mentions it repeatedly, how they clearly violated this order. They did that, so she brings it up a lot. And that's where, and I believe it was already brought up on the last time when she tried to wanted to do the testing. I think it's already been brought up by the state once, and they're going to bring it up again. And they're going to say, like, this order you keep talking about has nothing to do with what you're asking and what you're saying. So there's no violation.
Yeah, it was brought up in December, and I relied on it without checking. And I'm like, man, they are in so much trouble. And fortunately, I thought, well, I'm going to go look at this. And I'm like, holy cow, this doesn't say what she is implying it says at all. And so, Erekose, it's not germane to the motion, which is why it was so disappointing to see it in there. She didn't need to mention that at all. She could have used it. It should have been a footnote. It should be noted that, the court entered a specific order. It was limited to blood. What the only key thing about that, and it was during the context that are arguing over whether the EDTA science should come in during the trial. And they lost, and it's like, okay, well, we want that stuff preserved so we can test this at a future date. And brilliant for them to do that. And then the key part of it is in the transcript, Gahn says, well, yeah, there's an evidence preservation statute that covers all of this. So
Yeah, he did.
we have no problem with it. But what she should have cited it solely for the premise that Gahn, who, as we know, was
prompted him to say that.
Well,
yeah, because they brought, what happened was,
write it.
Yeah, what happened was that they argued over this during the whole EDTA fiasco during the trial.
Right.
And that's when they brought it up, and that's when Gahn said, well, this can be addressed in after the trial because we do have a preservation a statute in place for this very thing. So all they have to do is file a motion, that can be addressed after the trial to preserve whatever evidence, and I think it was Allie that asked, well, why didn't they ask to preserve everything? Good question, because that's all the defense asked for. Yeah, they only asked to preserve the EDTA stuff because that's all they were focused on. They should have obviously asked to preserve at least the pelvic bone because that was something that they knew hadn't been identified, but it was central to what their defense that they were trying to make. So why they didn't include that, I have no idea. Because all the judge did was just approve their motion that they made to preserve those items.
Right.
So they could have asked for something else. It's not like they couldn't have. They just didn't for whatever reason.
Lends more creed to the ineffective assistance of counsel claims, I think, possibly anyway.
Well, but
on certain things that they were missing other things. I'm not trying to get critical here, guys. I'm just
well, Zellner didn't even make that
critical.
one of her Zellner didn't make that one of her IAC claims, failure to include the pelvic bones, but in their defense, the heat of trial, where I've been many times, it was in the context of what they were talking about. They're talking about testing, and FBI has this new test, and it just popped up recently after months and months and months, because remember, they were set for trial and there was no test available according to the FBI.
Right.
Then it got delayed at the defense's request from September until February. And then lo and behold, oh, by the way, we're going to have somebody from the FBI who's going to say there's no EDTA in there. And, they preserved all of the issues. They fought that battle. And then it's, that's a pretty common thing. Okay, well, if you're going to let them testify, that's more of a message to the expert before he gets on the stand. Right. It really is that, look, whatever you say, you need to be aware that there's going to be an order preserving that stuff, and it's going to be available. So, if you cross the line, that stuff's available in the future. And so the judge said, okay, I'll order that. And then that's why we have an April 7th, order. He said, submit me a motion and have the other side take a look at it, and, I'll sign it. And then the trial went on. But Gahn says on the record, I'm aware of the evidence preservation statute.
Right.
Okay, but here's the second part, and why I was disappointed. I agree with Tracie that she could have done this better. Who was present during the bone examination to determine what was human and what wasn't, and to give back to the hall box? So you got Gahn, and so she's closing the door in on them, and I don't know why she argued multiple times that this evidence preservation order was somehow example. And getting to a question you kind of were asking, Erekose, isn't it all kind of moot? Well, yeah, it doesn't apply. So, but that's not going to prevent the state from saying, oh, and by the way, you can't trust anything this lawyer says in her brief. Here's an example.
Right.
And then you guess what Exhibit 1, if they're ordered to file a response, guess what Exhibit 1's going to be to their motion, their response? It's going to be a copy of that order. It's going to be a copy of that order. And, and Tracie's absolutely right. Why give them a win right off the bat on something that doesn't even help her argument?
Yeah.
But
Well,
now that we've complained about that, Tracie, tell them how much of a difference this is going to make. This doesn't kill Zellner's motion, right?
And that's why I said it wasn't even a necessary argument to make, because it doesn't really change anything as far as what the other stuff that she has to prove that they violated the statute or that they violated the due process. It doesn't change that. It's never good to misrepresent something to a judge.
yeah.
Ever.
So it's an example of.
I said in my video, I said we would not like it if the state did it. We'd be jumping all over them if they said that an order said something that it didn't say. So, as far as I'm concerned, I can't, just turn a blind eye when Kathleen does it. I mean, you have to keep the lawyers honest, and that's the whole point. Is that it's just it's not good to misrepresent something that much. I'm not a fan of it.
Yeah. Right.
So
well,
we both agree.
I agree.
We both agree.
It shouldn't be there. I would prefer it wasn't there, but I don't know.
But it doesn't change the substance of the motion.
Sure.
Otherwise,
all the other claims,
all the other arguments.
Yeah.
Right. And I think other than that, as far as the part about the preservation and the due process violation, I think it's a great motion. It's just that one aspect I wish would have been left out.
So listen to what Tracie just said there. So this is an example of not what to do in appellate advocacy. And but is this a make or break on the motion? Is this she's going to lose because of this? Absolutely not. And a few people at first came away with that during Tracie's live, and as Tracie explained it more and more. But I just want to head that off that this is not going to cause the motion to be denied outright because of that. It's just something you don't want to do, and something that popped out at both of us, but it's not going to make or break the motion.
Right. So let's see here. Look. Okay.
Well, let me.
Pom asks what?
Go ahead.
Pom asks, but the COA said though that it was apparent that the two parties agreed to preserve evidence. I think what she's meaning is they were agreeing for Zellner was talking with Fallon in the state to test more evidence. I think is what she means.
No, what
the thing is that
is
so is there something else in place?
Right. Well, and she could be referring to the order, because the Court of Appeals can only make a decision based on what was presented to them. She didn't include that order with her motion. So the Court of Appeals accepts as true anything that a lawyer says, and then it has to be, when you're making a decision, they haven't read everything else in the case. They haven't considered everything else. So she didn't include that order with her motions. So they didn't have that in front of them when they're just saying, well, apparently, according to her, you had an agreement, and now you need to go and figure that out.
Yeah, did the order say that? I thought what they were agreeing to agree on is microscopically testing the pelvic bones. And then she filed 2 supplemental letters saying,
let me look at the order.
Yeah, I thought it was all about,
That's the way I remember it. She also wanted the skull fragments.
They were misleading me and saying, we had a meeting in September of 2016, maybe, that, they were going to let me microscopically test 8675. And lo and behold, this is on the list. And she didn't cover that in her original motion to remand and stay in remand. It came up in the 2 supplemental filings, the letters. One was, I just found out that the stuff that they've been agreeing to let me test, they gave away. And then she hit them with the second letter saying, not only that, I've been trying to confirm whether it's been given away or not, and they're playing games. They're saying, don't respond to me.
Right.
This is how they choose to handle things. hide and obscure and so on and so forth. But you have the order there, Tracie. Were you able to find that? I thought
Not
it was
yet.
about.
Yeah, there's I haven't found it yet.
So
I thought she was hammering Julie. I thought she was hammering in the order, or what the order talked about is, and they say it, according to defendant's counsel, there was some sort of an agreement about these items, but that was leading into the ultimate conclusion is the Court of Appeals said, there's enough here. We think this needs to get straightened out. And we're sending it back to determine if there's a violation of the statute and or Youngblood. But, it may be, Julie, that they mentioned that order, but if they did, it's exactly what Tracie said. It's based on the representations of Zellner, which is another reason why you never want to do that, because when it goes back to the Court of Appeals on a motion, certainly, you don't want those judges thinking, hey, we can't trust what she says. And they'll say, I'm not going to read further. I'm not going to dig deeper, or they're going to have a clerk double check everything she says. So that's just one more reason why you don't want to skirt on something clear like an order.
Yeah,
we could debate what the order says. That's
it says
appropriate.
it says here, it says that the state has not responded to Avery's supplemental filings alleging the possible destruction of evidentiary items, which it appears the parties previously agreed to preserve. So yeah, I think he's referring to that preservation order, because there's never been any agreement that they preserve. That's the only time she's ever mentioned that there are certain things should be preserved.
Well,
if he would have said
really
the parties previously agreed to test, that's different, because there was an agreement to test, but there was never an agreement to preserve. So yeah, I think referring to the preservation order without actually seeing it.
Yeah, for me, the important part is, the whether or not they were agreed to preserve or not is not important. The fact is they agreed that they had them.
It is
they agreed
now.
that they had them.
It's
and
important now.
Saying they had them when they didn't is what, folks? It's disingenuous.
Disingenuous. Let's all say it together.
Well, he's not clear in his ruling on that. If he specifically, agree, that's really bad. I mean, that's going to come back to haunt her. I didn't realize that. That's a good catch, Julie. That's a problem. You got the Court of Appeals relying on her representation and formulating an order, which is a false representation. To use her frame, it's demonstrably, to use her phraseology, it's demonstrably false. I mean, you just pick up that order and it does not say what she says it does. It's bigger than I originally thought.
All right, well, moving on.
Yeah, move on.
So anyways, when it comes down to it, regardless of what Travis is talking about, I think that's moot. She shouldn't have said it. She kind of was possibly misrepresenting a little bit, but anyways, it's still, to me, important that the state was dealing with her. They were saying that they had those things and they don't. So that's, for me, that's the important part. It shows
and that is the important
they were
part.
misleading. And they were being dishonest, as they have been shown being dishonest in many things lately. So I'm going to stick with the point that the state is being shown to be a lot more dishonest right now than Stephen Avery's side of the coin is. So, so we'll move on to those things that the state is doing over and over again here. So obviously they shouldn't have given the bones back. That's part of our argument here. That should have never been done. It's protected by statute, whether or not it's protected by the order given, the order from Judge Willis, it's protected by statute. So it's still protected. It still shouldn't have been given back. It's still a point, moving forward here. they still tried to hide the fact that they gave these bones back, showing, number one, that they fear the consequences of their actions. That's why they didn't want to tell anybody they did it. Okay, right? Especially not Stephen's lawyers or Stephen himself. Okay, so that shows them now being dishonest and trying to hide what they knew was wrong. So for me, that compounds the act of giving the bones back. It compounds it even further because they're trying to hide it. It shows that they knew it was wrong. Any disagreements?
No,
No, I
and
agree with all of that. But
Okay.
why give Judge Angie an opening to
But I
deny the
understand.
motion?
No, but I just wanted to follow up with something strong because
No, it is strong and it's in her motion. No, I agree with you. It's strong and it's in her motion, but yeah, it's it's not the end of the world.
See,
but
I don't agree that it's as big of a deal as Travis thinks it is. I just think that, like I'm just not a fan of the practice, but
sure,
I don't think it's that big of a deal as far as because like I said, every time you present something, Kathleen went over this a lot in the original petition, is that you have to go by the assumption that what they're saying is true. It doesn't mean when everything is all said and done and gets sorts out that everything is going to be factually correct. It's like what the Court of Appeals said. Again, they didn't have the order in front of them. They're just going by what she said. I don't think that's that big of a deal. I personally just, like I said to begin with, I didn't like it because this motion, because I feel like it's misrepresenting it. And I just didn't like giving the state any ammunition at all because I didn't think it was necessary and I didn't think she needed it. But it doesn't change anything.
Right.
Yeah, but it doesn't change anything as far as my opinion on the motion or of whatever. I think it's a good motion. I think it is. I think she did everything else that she needed to do. And yeah, it doesn't change anything with regards to what the state did wrong and them trying to cover their butts. And, we'll get to it later. But I mean, even if, when we get to the voicemail from Fallon, that sounds like a guy who's really worried about covering his butt. Like he knows he's in trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so I think she's okay. I think
yeah.
Yeah, it's just that it was just I just was one of those things like, why did you do that? I wish you wouldn't have done that. Mm-hmm. But it's not going to change anything.
Right. Yeah. It's just like when recently, and I know the state was behind it when there was that whole thing with the media where they were trying to, say that Zellner was delaying this appeal. Zellner was stalling. Zellner was blah, blah, blah. No. Look, it's not Zellner choosing to hand out this evidence, to hand over this evidence the way the state has chosen to do it. It's not Zellner choosing to do that. They hand it to her and she goes, "What the hell?" And she says, "Hey, Court of Appeals, this issue arose." I'm talking about the CD folks, right? So she goes, "Oh, okay, yeah, this arose," and the Court of Appeals remands it back. It was significant enough to them that they remanded it back. I think maybe the state didn't think the Court of Appeals would do that. I think maybe the state thought the Court of Appeals would have waited. But I don't know. I don't know that for sure, but something tells me that I think the state was reasoning that way, and they may have been shocked when the Court of Appeals remanded it. But who knows? But then they were completely just hiding this issue of them giving the bones back. I mean, that only got found out because of us out here with the full documents, because, Skip Top and everybody went over and crowdsourced and got all those documents for us. We got all of them, all the updated documents, and we were able to show Zellner. Thank you to the supporter out there that did that. We were able to show her that this was happening, right? So she was able to then, make an effective argument as these things have been given away. And I was dealing with the state just, last year, a year and a half ago, whatever it was, and they were telling me they had all these things, So, yeah, no matter what, that claim, to me, has a lot of bite. Still has,
And it is important that even though there may not have been an agreement on the preservation, there was an agreement on the testing. There was an agreement to test those pelvic bone or that pelvic bone or those pieces of the pelvic bones in particular. There was an agreement in place for that.
Right.
And again, this is why Fallon's got some explaining to do.
Here's what she says in her motion.
Yeah, man.
I was going to look, but I couldn't get it to open up on my iPad. My iPad is funny. Yeah.
Here we go. It's paragraph 40.
Paragraph 40.
Of her motion to stay in remand. Additionally, the state acted in bad faith when it was on notice that the trial court had ordered preservation of certain items of DNA evidence yet proceeded to effectuate the loss of biological evidence within its control. On April 4, 2007, the trial court entered an order for the preservation of blood evidence. Okay, I don't feel so bad now. We're cool.
Yeah. Yeah,
blood
because
evidence and independent defense testing. The order contemplates and allows future DNA testing by Mr. Avery, and then she cites to the record 396 or 5, I can't read it. That's referencing a document number, pages 1 through 3. In its order, the trial court gave Mr. Avery the opportunity to, at any time, submit items of evidence for DNA testing. So it's not that big a deal.
Yeah, that last part is what is, because it's like, well, they did submit that and you did test that. So that's the only part that's a little like questionable there. But
I think in the beginning, I agree. She went a little overboard, but the motion today that was filed yesterday, she's not as clear cut as that. I don't have the motion in front of me, but which is why it caused Tracie and I concern, but she lays it out. She's not 100% clear about it. She doesn't attach it to her original motion, but she references it. She's clear that it's talking about blood, which means it's not bones. But again, what's the point of that? The order contemplates and allows future DNA testing by Mr. Avery. As Tracie just pointed out, all the testing had been done. She'd been allowed to do.
Okay, so
go ahead.
Well, I was to say, I'm just going to read the part in the motion from yesterday or from today. That is what I kind of put a rectangle around here of where it really bothered me.
Finish it out with that
later, but might as well just get it out of the way while we're talking about it. She says, post-trial, the state was aware of the apparent exculpatory value and materiality. I can't say it. Materiality.
The materialness.
Yeah.
Materiality.
The materiality.
The materiality of the bones prior to their destruction when the trial court entered an order on April 4, 2007 for the preservation of blood evidence and independent defense testing. This order contemplates and allows future DNA testing by Mr. Avery. In its order, the trial court gave Mr. Avery the opportunity to, at any time, submit items of evidence for DNA testing. Both the apparent exculpatory value and materiality of the bones was established by the April 2007 order. That's what I have a problem with.
Right.
That's way overboard.
Yeah, see, that's what I have a problem with, because it absolutely does not say that. And so that's where it bothered me.
Right.
Because that was very specific about talking about it, addressing or talking about the bones, and it doesn't. So, okay, let's be done with that. I'm done with that.
All right.
To all your listeners,
Player Rocks 2. Thank you very much, by the way. Sorry.
To all your listeners out there, so that's we're doing what lawyers do when you're analyzing a brief. We're nitpicking over 2-3 words difference, and because they make a difference. But hopefully it's been an educational exercise that things can hinge on one comma. Things can hinge on what the definition of is.
Right.
No, seriously. I mean,
understand what you mean. Yes. Language is important, and the way that you structure it is important. That's absolutely right. So Slayer Rocks 2. The state has essentially admitted TH bones were in the quarry by handing them back to the family. Now it cannot be proven otherwise. And I essentially agree with that. I feel like the state handing those bones back is just basically like a confession or an admission that they are Teresa's bones. They certainly did not want to say that at trial. They certainly wanted to stay as far away from saying that at trial as they possibly could. But you see here clearly that they pretty much all along, I feel, it would seem to me that they pretty much all along realized that those were probably Teresa's bones.
Tracie has some good thoughts on this about what even Kratz knew, or she mentioned in her last live.
Well,
Do you want to fill in on
right,
that?
well,
Thank you,
this is
Unicorn
why-
Artie, by the way. Sorry, go ahead.
This is why the evidence ledgers were so important, because prior to that, the argument could be, we couldn't assume what the state knew or what the state thought. Yes, to us, it seems crazy. Like, why would you hand over bones to the family if you didn't think they were Teresa's? What, why would you do that? Did the family know you were giving them, animal bones supposedly or possibly? So this is why the evidence ledgers are so important, because that shows that when they took those bones out of inventory, they knew they were human.
Right.
Well, if they were human, then who the hell else's were they? Because if they weren't Teresa's, because
Right.
was anybody else they know of killed in that area?
Right.
I mean, so, and then also Dr. Eisenberg's report
Was used.
was
Right.
used. And when you look at her report, specifically now for 8675, it has a question mark and it says bone of unknown origin. But for tag numbers like 7411, 7412, it said calcined human bone. Doesn't say possible, doesn't say suspected. It says human bone.
Right.
That report was obviously available to them prior to trial. That gives her the option of saying that Kratz knew there were human bones there, despite what he told the jury.
Right.
So those are two very important pieces of or documents to
You're
prove.
right. He focused on the possible human bones
Right.
to discredit them and didn't focus on the ones that were found that were human.
We're human. He acted
Right.
like they were only at best possible, at best, and he's like, we deal in facts here. We don't deal with conjecture.
Right.
We don't do, well, you have a report that you had that shows that you knew that they were human bones in that quarry. And again, what's the word?
Disingenuous.
It's disingenuous to say in front of a jury, it is. I mean, and then that's very important. And the evidence ledgers are important because it just shows again that when they handed the bones over to the family, they themselves put on their human bones and they handed them over. So they can no longer rely on, well, they were just suspected human. They were possible human.
Right. It's like they've basically gone all the way in now. They're all in, basically.
And I think that's why probably they got real nervous after those evidence ledgers came out, because they can't really talk their way out of that one.
Right. So somebody here is asking, Jamie O'Brien is asking, but why hasn't the blood from a male found in the quarry been tested to find out who it belongs to? It has been tested, Jamie. They have a profile. They know it doesn't match Stephen or Brendan or any of the Averys, really. But they don't know whose specifically it is. That's what they don't know.
It would be really interesting if they could resubmit it, because in 13 years, that person could be in.
Could have shown up in CODIS.
Yeah. Yep. Even though they weren't then, you never know.
Sure.
So
That's definitely a possibility.
That'd be something that would be something that I would like to be able to do once she's able to do any type of testing again.
Let's see here. I'm sorry for the tangent, everyone. I was trying to okay, sorry, that wasn't a question.
There's no tangents. There's no bad questions. If it's not germane, we'll just let you know.
But
it's a wait later time. We'll let Erekose hunt a little bit more, and then we'll start to go through the steps now if you want.
We can move on. So there's some more of the motions. So, obviously, like we were just talking about, Ken Kratz misrepresenting the bones in his closing arguments. Obviously, what Tracie and I were just saying, where he focused on pointing out the possibly human bones while not talking to the jury at all about the ones that had been identified as human bones that were over in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. So she spent some time going through that. She actually points out also at one point in here that the November 4th flyover video does not show any RAV4 tracks leading up to where the RAV4 is, but yet there are clearly tracks on the 5th, strongly suggesting that the RAV4 was planted. So she goes through a lot of things, obviously. She talks about the cadaver dogs hitting on 2 burn piles over in the gravel pit.
Is Allie on? Is Allie on right now?
Absolutely, yeah.
I'd like to see you and Allie, whenever's convenient for both of you. Allie was in the in Tracie's basically a lawyer Facebook chat, and they were talking about, has Eisenberg's second report, has that been available to the public or not? And of course, who's our go-to person? If you want to know if something has been released before, is always Allie. And it didn't look like it. And then Allie also mentioned that it was interesting what was mentioned about the tire tracks. I'd like to see you and Allie do a video. I'd be glued to my seat about what, these few factual things that have come up and what Allie's impressions are about the stuff factually. It's always great to get her input and insight on that stuff. And there were a couple of surprises that way. So it's just food for thought that, it's already, there's a few things that are popping out on the factual side of the motion that we hadn't seen before. And so I think it'd be a good idea you guys talk about that and get your insight into it.
Certainly. Allie and I will be getting together again soon. Allie, I spoke to Gina today, by the way. We may be doing that Darley video with her soon. Anyways. So, Pom Pom asks, so is it legally considered lying since Kratz purposely didn't mention the human bones? I would say no. I would classify it more as omission of truth.
Well, no, Zellner classified it in that intro you mentioned. She said, it was a misrepresentation of the jury, but that's why she mentions that. It rose to the level that it's a deprivation of a constitutional right. You cannot obtain a conviction based on a false narrative. And these are, her motion is limited to two things: the preservation statute and the Youngblood line of cases. So she's limited into a narrow lane what she can bring up. But remember what her narrative, remember what she has said throughout. If you watch MAM2, every episode, the state has presented a false narrative, and she's talked about how do you get a conviction reversed for a new trial. And one of the ways is to show, and you all remember this catchphrase, to show their narrative is demonstrably false.
Yes.
And so this is the specific ways that you show that. But there's a reason why she spent almost a full page talking about this false representation to the jury that started out in opening statement, carried through with specific witnesses, and culminated in the closing argument of Kratz. But no, it's a good observation. I agree. I don't. Tracie may have some thoughts on this. I don't think it came up during her episode. Some people were asking about it. Does prosecutors have almost unlimited immunity? And so when they get up in closing argument and say X is Y, they're not going to go to jail for that. It's not perjury. They're not under oath. They may have bar implication, ethical problems because of it. We saw that in the Duke lacrosse case when the prosecutor got the expert to take a line out of the DNA report, and that prosecutor was disbarred. But I'm sorry, if you're looking for your pound of flesh from criminal actions against the prosecutors or law enforcement, it's just not going to happen. The best case scenario is Stephen and Brendan get out and they get big fat checks and they move out of state and live, the best possible life that they can after having to undergo both these nightmares. But, it's just not going to happen. But Tracie, what are your thoughts on that.
Well, the important thing is that Kathleen's not bringing this up as an ethical violation against Kratz or even prosecutorial misconduct. She's bringing it up as another point to show what they knew and how they violated his rights of due process by providing a false narrative to the jury. That's the only thing it's going to accomplish, is to help support her argument that he did not receive a fair trial. That's it. So there will be no consequences for Kratz on this. There will be nothing. It will be, she's using it as supporting evidence of a violation of his constitutional rights.
Somebody did ask earlier if she would get to cross-examine Kratz if Stephen got a new trial. I think if she gets an evidentiary hearing on the CD, or let me see, not on the bones, he wasn't part of that, but on the CD, she would actually get him in court, wouldn't she? It wouldn't need to go to a retrial.
She would on this too, now that she's brought him up in the motion.
She's brought him up, so she'd be able to get him on the stand now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there you go, folks. It wouldn't even take a retrial. She could potentially, if she just gets her evidentiary hearing, could get some of these bad actors on the stand. That's what I really want to see. I want to see her going at Fallon right now. I just want to see her getting on there, Fallon, going, now, didn't you make an agreement, or weren't you in the process of making an agreement with us last year to test the hip bone and the remember the skull fragment too? We were agreeing, and whatever. Like, you said you had these bones, right? And then like, but look at this page of queso, or look at this ledger. This ledger says the opposite. Can you explain that for us, Mr. Fallon? Anyway, I would love it. Watch him squirm trying to explain that. I would love it. Love it, love it, love it. So, let's see. Sue Jones says she notices the first time KZ referred to the two differing states' narratives for Stephen and Brendan, where it was all about Stephen committed the act alone in Stephen's trial, and then in Brendan's trial, it's all about how Brendan helped Stephen. Right. So that's not even the best one, folks. The best one to point out is the fact that Stephen. Okay, we'll start with Brendan. Brendan was convicted of aiding in what's it called?
Abetting?
No, in torture and in mutilation of a body of a corpse.
Oh,
or
the
whatever.
Mutilation of a corpse. Yeah.
Okay, so he was found guilty of that, folks, in aiding but who the hell was he aiding and abetting in it? Because Stephen wasn't convicted of that. So who is he helping? So that's for me the more fun thing to point out, really. But anyway, I mean, not fun, but anyway.
Yeah, she mentions that in passing in the motion today. I'm just going to say the motion, which is the actual motion that got filed yesterday, as opposed to the motion for stay and remand that led up to this. So just the motion is what was filed yesterday. She footnotes in the motion about this inconsistent narrative, but the legal significance of that, I think, she's pointing it out more to show what was argued in Stephen's case, so that she can show what Tracie just mentioned, that it's demonstrably false. It's a false narrative, that so knowing misrepresentation, whatever you want to call it, the fact that different theories were presented to obtain the convictions of Stephen and Brendan isn't of much, in my opinion, legal significance for this particular motion at this time.
Yeah. So,
Tracie, any different thoughts on that?
Nah, I'm good.
So basically, we, there's gets into talking about the fact that the updated ledger sheets, the updated queso, is how she discovered that they had given these bones back. Basically all the stuff that we generally know here, that these bones were given back to the hall box. They shouldn't have been. It's a violation of statute. But she's, pointing out that it was actually Thomas Fallon, who is actually in there giving these bones back. And for me, that's pointing out, she's trying to point out that the fact that Fallon trying to play dumb in this is really silly. Him trying to play dumb is just like, I mean, it doesn't get any more disingenuous than that, in my opinion, really. Because, I mean, for him, all the things he said at trial, to do so at their own peril crap and all this stuff, and then he goes and he's a party to this little charade. You know what I mean?
Well, Tracie said earlier that it's, and I concur, it's clear that from what we know now that they were rattled, and particularly Fallon was rattled.
You got to imagine. I mean, what argument does he have for his actions right now?
I hope you're well. I hope you're well.
Yeah, hope you're well. That cracked me up.
I hope
voicemail.
you're well.
Hope you're doing well.
Hope you're doing well.
Okay.
Fallon's voicemail. Did you listen to it? Did you get to listen to it?
Oh, the one where Mark Williams? You mean?
No, Fallon.
The one today. The one today.
No, I didn't get to hear that.
Yeah, he ended it with "Hope all is well," or "Hope you're doing well."
Spoiler alert! Sorry, too bad.
No worries.
Well, for people who have the opportunity, actually, so Pom Pom, I can't see the feed. Please post your link to your excellent website where you've posted all the exhibits, including the audio file of the voicemail message that Tom Fallon left Kathleen about the status of the bones, where he hems and haws, as we like to say down here in Texas. He hems and haws better than any cattle rancher I've ever heard. And he said, well, it does look like we've given away many of the bones, but we're not exactly sure. And we're having a meeting down over there on Friday, and worse than me, folks, I swear. And he said, we're going down there Friday, and we'll let you know. Hope you're well. Hope you're doing well. You can tell it from that phone call.
Oh gosh, that's funny.
He was pooping his pants.
Laura Boggs asks, do the issues here in Stephen's motion, would they also apply in Brendan's case as well? Because aren't the bones essentially proving that a murder took place? I mean, isn't it essentially proving that there was a murder in order to bring charges? Or is that, I don't know, you guys, if you guys could talk about that for a second.
I want to hear Tracie's thoughts on this. So, are these bones, is there a way that Brendan's team, the DNA testing statute says you can bring a motion at any time to do DNA testing. But you've got to show their material and potentially exculpatory. I don't know enough about the underlying facts of Brendan's case. Mark, the Hod, and I had about a 30-minute discussion today about that very issue, and I'd be very interested to hear what Tracie's thoughts are on that subject. Do you think Brendan's legal team, since the discovery of these bones being potentially destroyed under Youngblood and or the preservation statute, you think there's a way that Brendan's legal team can hook that in some way?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the statute is the same and the act is the same. Doesn't matter who's whether it's Steve or Brendan's trial. Mm-hmm. The preservation statute is the same no matter what. And the fact that they destroyed evidence that was the result of a criminal investigation that resulted in their convictions, that is all the same. The only thing that would make it different is if the fact that the pelvic bones were used. Well, actually, I think they were used in both trials, weren't they? Weren't they used in Brendan's as well?
I don't know. That's what I can't remember.
Eisenberg was on the stand. So, yeah, either way, it should apply to both of them because, okay. I said that it's evidence that was used it was material that was collected during the criminal investigation for both their cases. So
Right.
it should be the same no matter what. If it's a violation for one, it should be a violation for the other.
Okay. Right on.
But to get to, that it's a constitutional deprivation, doesn't Brendan have to show whether it's under the statute? Clearly under Youngblood he does, but under the statute, don't you still have to show materiality, which, some people might term causation? So you can't just go in there and say, hey, there was a ham sandwich that was collected and you guys destroyed it without telling us about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not enough. You can't show that biological evidence was merely destroyed. You got to show a materiality component of it, right?
It's
That-
material in the same
That it
way,
could have
though.
impacted the trial, right?
Right.
Because even under the narrative in Brendan's trial, now Brendan did say something in his confession about going to the quarry, and possibly like dumping bones in the quarry. That could be somewhat possibly problematic, but Brendan also said that they buried bones in a hole next to the burn pit.
Brendan said a lot of things.
Yeah, Brendan said a lot of things.
And I have no doubt that Tom and Wiegert might have been like prodding him to say things about the quarry just because he knew the cadaver dogs were hitting all over it.
But
so that is potentially problematic because Brendan did mention leaving the property. Whereas in Steve's case, the whole narrative was they never left the property.
Right.
And so that could be problematic, but honestly, that's going to be the least of the state's worries, honestly.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure they'd fight it that much at that point because they only want to keep Brendan to keep Steve.
Right.
If they overturn Steve's conviction, I don't think they'll be fighting so hard against Brendan.
Right.
And so they the confession, the false confession of Brendan, that's the law of that case. That's not going anywhere. So even if let's say there's a clear violation of the statute in Brendan's case, there's clear materiality, and let's just say there's also clear-cut, dead bang bad faith in Brendan's situation.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot reopen up the false confession. That's done. It's over with forever. And so that's why Tracie's saying that's a potential problem, is that they can say in Brendan's situation, yeah, so what? You confessed, and that's a legal good confession according to the law.
Mm-hmm.
You said you went outside the property, you went to the quarry. So yeah, and so they can take an alternative, they can make alternative theories and arguments. In Brendan's case, they can continue with that because they're based on the convictions were based on different evidence. I didn't realize Eisenberg testified at
yes.
Brendan's.
I think she did. I could be totally forgetting right now, but I thought she did.
I'm just not up on it. I followed all of the legal stuff intensely, but I didn't go through I went through about half the transcripts.
Right.
Because the issue in legal issues in Brendan's case weren't so much the forensics and whatnot. We know that there wasn't really any forensic evidence at all that tied him to the case. What it was is, was this under the law coerced interrogation? Whereas, it was all of that. So it was more looking at his testimony and so on and so forth. But
well, see, okay, the sticking point with Brendan is that in order to establish a due process violation, the bones at the very least have to be potentially exculpatory. In Steve's case, the state's narrative was that he never left the property. Teresa never left the property. And so therefore, if those bones are Teresa Halbach's, then Steve didn't kill her because he didn't leave the property.
Right. Yeah.
In Brendan's case, that's not true because Brendan said they left the property. So if those bones turn out to be Teresa's, are they exculpatory? Probably not, because he said that they went to the quarry. I would have to reread Brendan's transcripts to really be able to give a more informed opinion, but that would definitely be a sticking point for Brendan.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, is Mark in the chat? The HOD? If he's not, we'd need to let him know. He should come back in and hear Tracie's views and comments, because they're much more well thought out and stated than the little visit he and I had today.
Mm-hmm.
But we want you guys,
today?
we want you prepped to be able to ask questions like these. If you get selected and they have a Q&A, we want you to have some questions like these to ask Laura and Steve.
Right.
I mean, people are really hoping that there is more of a pathway for Brendan than pardon or a commutation. And people are hopeful, and everybody's wondering how this is going to shake out. But I agree with Tracie. Yeah, they're holding Brendan because of Stephen, and if Stephen can get let go, unless they're just a bunch of vindictive bastards, which I've seen in some of their cases in Wisconsin, and they can be vindictive over 1 week. But maybe, and they keep saying that their style, Laura and Steve's, is way different than Kathleen's. And they hold their cards pretty close to their chest. And Steve, when asked about it, says, "Yeah, we're looking at different things," and totally take that team at their word. But they may not want to share too much, but it would be interesting to see if they're able to comment about these recent developments and how they.
A lot of people are pointing out here that the place that Brendan indicated was basically just over the berm on the other side of Stephen's trailer, which would be the Redont Quarry, and really nowhere near Manitowoc County gravel pit.
Okay,
so that's what a lot of people are saying. So
that might change things. It might not. It's just still something that I know would be an issue
argued.
that an issue that Steve doesn't have.
Right.
The point is that you have to go through the analysis, and you have to look at what the testimony was, and was that a false narrative? Was there knowing? You have to analyze the opening statement. You have to analyze the testimony. Did Eisenberg testify? What did she testify about? Remember, Kratz was second counsel. He was second chair. And you have to see what the closing arguments were about in reference to the bones, and how much of an issue of it was in Brendan's case. Kathleen, in her motion we've been talking about earlier, clearly lays out that it was a central issue in the trial, and I think, as Tracie mentioned, pretty effectively showed that when you connect all of the dots that Kathleen's laid out, that Kratz knew what he was arguing to the jury was false.
Yeah. Well, or that he wasn't telling the whole truth.
At best, yes.
Yeah, right. And that's the argument that they would make, of course, so, let's see here.
And so the analysis needs to be done. And me personally, I'm just not up to speed on the facts enough to be able to give a complete answer on that at present. But, I know you're going to be seeing Laura and Stephen, and there may be an opportunity. I hope you, Mark, or the Mad Scotsman can.
I just found out today that even though I sent my BC in last week on Tuesday and it arrived at the passport office at 9:30 a.m. on Tuesday morning last week, that the processing time is 7 business days. So basically, they're not even going to start processing my passport until Thursday, because that would be 7 business days. Lady I talked to today says it's still likely I'll get it.
Of course you will.
So that's where I'm at. But hopefully, I hope to be there.
Don't worry, dude. Don't worry. All is well.
Hey, I'm dealing with the stress, So, all right. So, all right. So basically, I don't see what we've got here is obviously they go into talking about how the state didn't tell Stephen Avery's lawyers, his appellate lawyers at the time, what they were doing, and they were hiding that. And then it gets into the interpretations, of the different tests of Trombetta and Youngblood, right?
Correct.
Yep.
And I'm gonna go ahead and let Tracie discuss that. Talk about the tests and how what the big deal is with why how it's going to matter which test is used and that sort of thing.
Well, if you haven't downloaded my flowchart, just download my flowchart.
Oh, there you go.
It's on there. Allie can probably find a link to it. It's in the reference section of my Google Drive. But
okay, and check on Discord for that later, folks. We'll make sure it's somewhere on Discord for you to check out.
Under Trombetta, it says that if the evidence is apparently exculpatory, essentially, then it's a due process violation, and you dispose of it. Apparently, again, like I said, is something that I think I said this in my other chat. I'm not sure when I said it. I said it to someone sometime. That when it's apparently exculpatory, that means that the testing itself can exonerate the person. That's why Kathleen is focused on Youngblood. Youngblood says that if it's potentially exculpatory, when it's potentially exculpatory, that means that the test results have the potential of leading to exonerating the person. It can lead down an avenue that could exonerate the person.
Sure.
So that's why she's focusing on Youngblood. But Youngblood then also has the added component of bad faith. Right. And you have to establish that there was bad faith on the part of law enforcement when they disposed of the evidence. And unfortunately, in the state of Wisconsin, Kathleen put in the footnote that there's never been a case in Wisconsin that has dealt with the violation of the preservation statute, but there's also never been a case in Wisconsin where a court has determined there was bad faith as far as disposal of evidence. They've always said it was neglect, incompetence, accidental, those things. So, it's a high bar for bad faith.
I don't know. It didn't
Tracie,
seem accidental. Doesn't seem accidental to me.
You better say there hasn't been a published case, or you and I are going to get mail. There hasn't been a published decision
in Wisconsin on the preservation statute. Violation of the preservation statute. Only one unpublished opinion. It doesn't matter.
So whatever you all are reading on Reddit about Kathleen should have cited the Dodge opinion.
I don't know why Kathleen would cite that, even if it was a citable opinion. It just doesn't work in her favor.
A lot of great stuff on Reddit, but you have to consider the source. And as Tracie pointed out, and frankly, Erekose, you and I discussed this. Dodge cannot be ethically cited by either side because it's a unpublished decision. Now in Texas, we can cite two unpublished decisions. We just have to point out it's unpublished. But Wisconsin has specific rules about you're not to cite to an unpublished decision that's per curiam or not signed by an individual judge. And Dodge does not meet the exception. It would be unethical for either side to cite to Dodge. And so whatever you read out there in the ether about that there is a decision in Wisconsin about the preservation statute, trust us, there is no published decision. There is no published decision in Wisconsin on the preservation statute. And neither side can cite to the Dodge case. That's what Tracie's pointing out. But so Tracie explain how Kathleen then argues how the evidence preservation statute might show might be per se evidence of bad faith.
Well, she's saying she's calling it a per se due process violation.
Mm-hmm.
Since there is no remedy provided in the statute itself, she is saying that it should be treated, well, first of all, that it's up to the judge to fashion a remedy because there isn't one.
Right.
But that if the judge does provide a remedy, it should be consistent with what the remedy is for an actual due process violation, because it's essentially the same type of thing. How can you say that you can overturn a conviction and it's a violation of due process to destroy evidence under the constitutional law, but not under the statutory law?
Right.
You know, when it's essentially very similar. And so she's saying that under statute, it's a per se due process violation, meaning it's not a violation, a bright line rule as a violation, but it's like one.
Right.
It's in the same vein as a due process violation. So she's saying that the remedy should be the same.
Right. That makes sense. It does.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, they're making an argument here that the commingling of the bones when given back to the Halbach family was bad faith. I guess because of contamination.
Yeah. How does she spell commingling?
Commingling? Yeah, that
Yeah.
confused me.
Yeah.
Okay.
2 M's. Yeah, there you go. Let's see. He establishes more. Yeah, so then they talk about that they can use the new quick DNA testing, obviously that was, recently used in California, to test these bones if they had not been given back. Let's see here.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything new. You've covered all of that in previous videos, and Tracie has as well. I don't, all of those arguments she's made in previous filings, and you and Tracie have discussed, as you know. I think the next new thing is the
Disqualification.
Yeah.
I know Tracie loves this bit.
Oh, yeah.
God. Oh, God.
I don't know. Here, I'm going to go ahead and offer some of my feelings about this here. I think, really, that Zellner has taken the attitude that she's most likely not going to get any satisfaction from Judge Suck at this. And she is just basically like putting this in the motion because she knows so many people are following this, that most likely putting this in the motion that many people are going to hear this, so that people understand. She's saying, yeah, we want this corrupt judge out. We want this biased judge out. She's saying it. She's probably not going to get it right now. It's not the time for it, but she's saying it. I think this might be put in for the benefit of, outsiders looking in on this, or people learning about this, or people, following the case, so that they can see she's actively like, yeah, we'd like to get a fair judge. We'd love it. But I understand that this is not the proper really time or, appropriate, time or place for this or whatever. But I think ultimately she's expecting to get her satisfaction from the Court of Appeals. And so this, I think she just figured she could do this because she doesn't expect to get any satisfaction out of Judge Suck at this. So I'll hand it over to you guys at this point.
Well, Tracie's going to say, and she mentioned this during her video, and so I'm not going to give away or do any spoilers there, but I concur with you, Erekose. I think part of that was written more for the general public and or the media. And generally, as a general matter, you don't file. This one's a little bit different than the one she filed before. She was doing it under the automatic disqualification statute, and Tracie can explain why that one didn't apply any more than what she's arguing here. And you generally don't file a motion to recuse a judge that's not automatic. You know, if you have an automatic substitution like Wisconsin does, then you do it. You know, it's like a preemptory challenge on a judge. You make sure you meet the qualifications before you file it, but you know, you file it if you think that there might be somebody better other than that particular judge. And we already know she's the 4th most requested substituted judge in Wisconsin, even though she's from a tiny population-wise county. But for bias, or, you know, a recusal based on bias, we generally don't file those unless we're absolutely sure that we know it's going to be granted, because ultimately you do what's in the best interest of your client, and you don't want to piss off the judge. Maybe people remember the movie A Few Good Men, and Tom Cruise is getting sideways with the judge, and why are you getting so confrontational with the judge? The court members, that's what you call a jury in military court. You know, the court members, it's not being lost on them. You know, why are we getting into this like this? And well, it was actually Demi Moore's character. I object. I strenuously object. He gives her a lecture about, no, you don't lose your cool. And there's a reason for that. You don't want to piss off the judge. You don't, in this context, you know, there's no jury, but why, you know, ultimately you're there in the service of your client and to advocate for your client. And so why alienate the client, or alienate the judge? You know, if there's still some chance that you can make headway, which is the exception to the exception, unless you can't do any worse, then you go ahead and file it. And
right.
Then the judge, you know, if the judge is aware that you're aware, maybe the media is aware that you're aware, and, you know, it's not really preserving an issue for appeal, but it ultimately will, you know, what I thought when I first saw it, I thought, wow, again, during our little coffee talk this morning, I said, well, I thought it was pretty crafty of Kathleen to file it as part of the motion, rather than a separate motion. You know, Judge Suckathis can't make this go away. She can't summarily deny it, as it's there and it's never going away. Right. You know, and so, but I'll let Tracie speak to the merits of it, okay, and what her feelings are on it.
Before we go to Tracie and get that, Ziggy asks, how long does the state have to respond? So,
okay, we're going to get into all of that. We're going to get into all of those questions after this.
You want to go after this? All right, fine.
We're going to go through step by step, and everybody's going to know exactly how this works. While Tracie's explaining this and you have access to pull up 974.06, I would recommend that you do that, and you can follow through with us what the next step is.
Oh, they probably won't get much out of that, but for pulling that. Okay,
we're going to try. We're going to try, but Tracie, tell us about what your thoughts are on this part 2 of the motion.
Well, I agree that it was put in here probably for the public's sake. I think it was a total mistake to do it. I don't think there is any value in pissing off a judge, and this is going to piss off the judge. She might not say it. I would be surprised if she doesn't mention something, because it's going to piss off the judge, because she has no grounds to file this at all. None. Zero. Zilch. there is a mountain of case law that's working against her on this one. And if she could have come up with anything from Wisconsin that supported this stance, I could be okay with it. But it's actually the opposite. Everything in the case law completely goes against everything she said in here. So, and again, don't shoot the messenger. I didn't make the damn laws. I don't like Judge Suckowitz either, and I don't like her rulings, and I think that she's an idiot. But you can't change what the law is. Unfortunately, you have to work within it. And since she's already filed a motion to substitute the judge, I don't think there was any point in doing it again, or even though it's not a separate motion, I still don't think there's any point in doing it. So I disagree with her doing it. I agree that she did it for a reason, but I don't agree with that reason. So that's my opinion. Whatever. First off, she
gets to be eccentric, right? Because she has the numbers. The numbers of exonerations, right?
And honestly, in all honesty, again, that impresses the public. It doesn't impress a judge. I mean, it's the same thing. It's like she's trying this case in the public, and I totally get why she does what she does. I understand that, because you want to keep it out there. You want to keep people talking about it. You want to keep it in the forefront, but none of that is going to help in a court of law. It's not, nor should it. Like in this case, I wish it would, because I'm, on Steve's side on this one. But in general, I don't ever want the court of public opinion to decide a court case. I just don't.
Right.
It's not, in most cases, it wouldn't always work. You wouldn't want it that way.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Okay, so she cites the Supreme Court Rule 60, which is the ethical rules of conduct for a Wisconsin judge to follow. Okay. That is not what is used to determine whether a judge should recuse themselves or not at all. That's just an ethical rules of conduct. The rules that you have to follow are statutory, and that's covered under 75719. Okay. I don't really want to read all the reasons why a judge should substitute themselves. But basically, it's a judge shall disqualify themselves or recuse themselves if they're related to any party, if they've ever been a material witness in a case that's involving any of the parties, if they previously acted as counsel to either of the parties, if they previously worked for a firm that represented the parties or provided any legal documentation for the parties. If a judge was a circuit court judge and then they're now in the appellate court, they cannot sit on a case that they heard as a lower court judge. If they have any significant financial or personal interest in a case, which goes without saying. The only one that people would read and think, oh, this might qualify, even though it doesn't, is when a judge determines that for any reason he or she cannot, or it appears he or she cannot act as in an impartial manner. Okay.
I certainly would say it appears that she can't, but
okay, but here's the thing.
Obviously, the interpretation.
Yeah. Here's the thing about that. First off, the number one instructive case in this situation is State versus American TV. I told people in my group, remember it. You heard it here first, as some people say. The state will be using this citation. Okay, the State versus American TV is a controlling case in this area. And first, it specifically talks to the rules of conduct. It says the Code of Judicial Ethics, which is again SCR 60 that she cites, governs the ethical conduct of judges. It has no effect on their legal qualification or disqualification to act. So boom, that's out right away. Without even going any further. That shouldn't have even, it's not even a citation that's going to get anywhere, because it says very clearly. This is the part everyone's going to hate. And again, I agree, it's stupid, but this is how Wisconsin is. Because the basis for disqualification is subjective, requiring the judge's determination of an actual or apparent inability to act impartially, there is no standard. Oh, okay, wait, I gotta go back, because that's not the one I want to do yet. I want to get to something else. It says that State versus Harrell is another case, and it says that in sum, that statute, that particular 2G, which is the one I read, leaves the responsibility of withdrawal to the integrity of the individual judge or justice. To imply that a judge or justices of this state are not able to make such a determination honestly, openly, and fairly is a great disservice to the quality men and women who serve this state in a judicial capacity. Basically is, you don't accuse a judge of being impartial. in this state.
Well, I don't know. How else do you know? You got to say
Right.
something.
Well, that's the thing. So what the rules say is that I'm just trying to picture is that it is up to the judge and the judge alone to decide whether they can be impartial or not.
Yeah.
Without question. There is nobody else to question that. And this is what I was reading before that I stopped myself halfway through because it was very confusing. But even under appeal, if this goes in front of the Court of Appeals and you try to say this judge was impartial, the only thing that the Court of Appeals can review is whether the judge actually seriously considered whether they could be impartial or not. That's it. The appellate court cannot come in and say, we think you were impartial. They cannot do that. They can only say, well, did she do the requisite, like, did she show that she, do we think that she considered it? Basically is all they're saying.
Oh, well,
and
I
that's
think if we use the motion for post-conviction relief, I think you can take her order and match it up against the things that are in there, and I think you can make an argument that she didn't understand a lot of it.
No, you can't.
You can't though, because first off, 98% of prisoners, the circuit court judge rules against them. You're not going to prove a judge is biased against a prisoner because they rule against them, because they almost always do. That's not uncommon. And this is what I brought up. It said that the statute concerns not what exists in the external world, subject to objective determination, but what exists in the judge's mind. It requires disqualification when a judge determines that for any reason he or she cannot cannot act in an impartial manner. Sorry, I keep stumbling over my words. That part where it says concerns not what exists in the external world is exactly what I was just talking about. They're basically saying, whatever the external world thinks about this, we don't care. That's not what we're concerned with. We're concerned with what the judge thinks. If they say they can be impartial, then they can be impartial. And that's the end of it. There was one other one that, where was the other one that I was talking about, Travis? Before I was like, this sounds like there's
The American Bar Association model rules don't apply.
Right. Yeah, well, she cites ABA Rule 2.11. Okay. And that is not a Wisconsin rule. That is the general ABA guidelines that the federal ABA or the national ABA has determined, but they're guidelines. They're not something everyone has to follow. The Wisconsin court has not adopted that rule as far as disqualification goes. The case she cites is an Arkansas case, which has no precedential value in the state of Wisconsin whatsoever. And even in that case, because now when you talk about the fact that she's saying that you can't rule on a case when you presided over a previous case. First off, not true in Wisconsin. You can do it. That's the citation I was just looking for that I can't seem to find at the moment. Oh yeah, right here it is actually. But in the civil trial, Judge Suckowitz didn't preside. I mean, she was the judge of record. She didn't preside over anything. There was no ruling in the case. She didn't hear any evidence in the case. She didn't hear anything other than saying, okay, it's going to be dismissed. The fact that it took her a long time to dismiss doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything at all. No court's going to care about that. She didn't rule in the favor of one or the other.
I would argue one court did. The Court of Appeals made her sign it, right? But
right.
Anyway.
But it doesn't matter. I mean, that's not the point. The whole thing with bias is if she'd ruled against Steve and said that he was responsible for Teresa's death.
The fact that she didn't hear any evidence actually kind of, well, I understand that the law doesn't see it the way I do, but for me, the fact that she didn't hear any evidence and still held on to that thing and didn't want to do what the victim's family, who was one of the parties involved, was telling her that they wanted. Sure. I mean, I get it. The courts have a different way of looking at it, but for me, it's like huge red flag. Huge.
But the truth of the matter is, though, if there was a conflict or potential conflict or the appearance of conflict that Kathleen had a problem with, she should have filed this before she filed the petition, the original petition. She should have filed to get this judge off before. You can't, what I explained in my video is this is a supplement to the original petition. This is still part of the same petition. You can't have two judges rule on the same petition. It's judge shopping. It's one action and you're asking two judges to rule on it, two circuit court judges. You can't do it.
Right.
And so the fact that
if you don't file it before, good point. If you don't file it before, you're judge shopping. And that's how every court's going to look at it. You're judge shopping.
And since it was known,
I wondered why she had so much faith in Judge Suck at This. I wasn't calling her Judge Suck at This back then, but I did wonder why.
That's how it comes off. It comes off as like, well, you didn't want to get rid of a rapport. There was no conflict before, even though the civil case had concluded at that point and everything. So why didn't you bring up this fact of you thinking there was a conflict then? You can't come back later. And that's what the citation I was saying. It said that it says also not subject to deprecatory characterization as bias or prejudice are opinions held by judges as a result of what they learned. Oh, that's not the one I was reading. Sorry. That was not the one I meant. Gosh, I lost it again now. And it's important because I said it's one that, let me just look for it.
Find it while I make this one point. Tracie brought up something really good. So it may force the judge to state on the record in an order, in an opinion, something, maybe summarily denying this part, which she spends, it's a 35-page motion, and she spends a page and a half on disqualification of Judge Suck at This. Yeah. But just to get the judge to say, I'm not biased or prejudiced for either side, is sometimes a win. That's what happened in OJ with Judge Ito, where because his wife was a LAPD captain, it was raised, and sometimes you can get a judge just by raising it. Now, this is a direct in your face way of raising it. Sometimes we raise it in a more off the record way. Hey, judge, can we meet with you in chambers? And you have the other attorney in there. There's nothing unethical. You say, Judge, we're aware that, you received some flowers from a constituent, and we know it's not going to cause a problem, but doing our job for our client, we just wanted to confirm, you don't have any bias or prejudice towards either party, and just letting the court know that right. It is sometimes enough that they start looking behind their shoulder, and like Ito became hugely aware of the media, and they just become a different person. And sometimes that works hugely in your favor. And if it works out, then you look like geniuses, like the Dream Team did. If it didn't work out, then you look stupid. But they did that before anything started with Judge Ito. That was their first step. They didn't wait halfway through the trial
to say
losing motions or evidentiary rulings or objection after objection. They didn't wait until then. They hit them at the appropriate time. Tracie, did you find that case you were looking for?
It was actually under State versus Harrell. I just didn't realize I had two citations there. It says, while an assessment of whether a judge appears partial might initially seem to be open-ended, it does not give litigants license to ferret out anything which might appear suspicious and use it as a basis for demanding a judge's disqualification. That's pretty much speaking exactly to what is happening in this case. And that's, again, so State versus Harrell, you can expect that probably to be a citation as well. It's like, just because things might appear suspicious, you do not get to use that as a basis for demanding a judge's disqualification.
Right. Okay.
You know,
well, there you go, folks.
Yeah,
I'm
as I
glad-
said, it's like the two areas that she, and again, before I get all sorts of hate mail, I'm not saying I like this. I'm not saying I agree with that only a judge can decide whether they're impartial. I don't agree with that at all. I'm just saying that's what the law says, and it's very clear. It's one of those areas where there's no gray area here. It's a very clear thing.
Right.
I'm glad you took the time to find that, because that is a key case, and that's
the thing is that you have to look at it like, okay, Judge Willis, I mentioned this again too earlier, but after he sentenced Steve, he called Steve probably the most dangerous individual who had ever stepped foot in his courtroom. And yet, even after saying that, he was still allowed to preside over his post-conviction proceedings, because that's not considered bias either. There's case law on that too. I didn't read all that because I wasn't talking about that, but yeah, they said that that's not considered bias either, because it's in the role of their fact finding in their judicial capacity is listening to the trial. He's allowed to have those opinions, but then you're expecting him to preside over his post-conviction proceedings and overturn his conviction.
Right.
Nothing seems more biased than that. In the Court of Appeals, Judge Neubauer and Judge Riley have already denied Steve's direct appeal. He's already lost in front of them, yet he has to go in front of them again. And there was another one that oh gosh, where's the other one? I should have looked for that one. I almost forgot about it. But it says that it's, Travis, do you remember what here it is. It said also, this is what I was reading before, also not subject to deprecatory characterization as bias or prejudice are opinions held by judges as a result of what they learned in earlier proceedings. It has long been regarded as normal and proper for a judge to sit in the same case upon its remand and to sit in successive trials involving the same defendant. So that goes to the whole conflict, because you were in one case, and it says not only is it proper, it's normal for that to happen.
Right.
And it is. So that's where that kind of just kills those arguments. And that's why I was like, I don't know why because she's taking an Arkansas case that has no precedential value against all of this very clear Wisconsin law.
Right.
I love when she cites Arkansas authority, because I always get to ask Tracie this question with a straight face. Tracie, in Arkansas, is it still legal to marry your sister? I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I love when Kathleen cites to Arkansas authority. Keep doing it, Kathleen, and I'm going to do that every single time. If you're from Arkansas, that's just a joke. It's just a joke. Don't want mail. Okay, should we go through the steps?
So somebody here, Kelly McCabe asks, what exactly is this motion going to Judge Sukowitz for? What exactly outcome could come from it? Kelly, I gotta ask, did you just come in? This motion, to briefly give you an idea, is a motion regarding the bones, which were given back to the Hallbacks, which shouldn't have been, and the fact that the state tried to hide the fact that they did that. That's the really short version, but that's the essential facts for you. It's basically the motion to call the fact that the state did some stuff they shouldn't have done, and that's where we're at. But I don't want to go over an hour and then 40 minutes worth of content right now, but I do encourage you to go back and watch. Sorry.
Yeah. And then the outcome can be either that the judge grants this supplemental motion and orders a new trial, which, as Tracie mentioned, in about the first 5-10 minutes, the state's going to appeal that. We're going to be back in front of the Court of Appeals, or the judge will deny the supplemental motion. And then this one little sliver, this one little issue about the bones, will be combined with the appeal.
Right.
And we're going to be back in front of the Court of Appeals. But rather than this issue dangling out there somewhere, it's going to be part of the appeal, and the Court of Appeals will hear all of our arguments: ineffective assistance of counsel, Brady, and now what we call spoliation or Youngblood claims.
Right.
And so the outcome will be either she orders a new trial or she denies the motion, and then we're going back to the Court of Appeals. Unless Tracie has a different view on that or something to add.
Not for that part, no.
Okay.
Someone just put in the chat, I saw that said to play with Justice. She looks bored.
Oh. It was actually Tracie, it was pretty funny at first because you were talking and Justice came like where the first slat is, like right past where the white wall is, and she poked her head out and like had the toy in her mouth and looked towards all of us. And it was really funny. Then she went down a couple steps and came out behind you.
She has this little issue right now where she goes through like these false pregnancy things. And that goofy little dragon in her mouth is her puppy. She thinks that's her. If you say, go get your puppy, that's what she'll go get it. She will not let that thing out of her sight. She will growl and she will go crazy if anyone tries to come near her puppy when she's sleeping.
Justice
Justice is an interesting little character. She really is. So yeah, she's just walking around with her puppy looking for attention.
Right.
Hi, Justice. Hello, Justice. You have your little puppy. You have your baby.
Yeah.
Hi, Justice.
It's the goofiest looking little dragon. I have no idea why she picked that for her puppy. Why?
All right. So
next steps is what we were talking about when the state has to file.
I was going to say what Travis was talking about now was basically the fact that whatever happens in the circuit court right now, which I pretty much whatever was put in this brief, I feel it was pretty much going to be denied and right back to the Court of Appeals. So all this, basically this issue, maybe, there's not a whole lot because no evidentiary hearing, there's not a whole lot of facts to whatever, but it's enough to allow Zellner to now raise these issues on appeal. And so now when she goes back to restart the appeals process, she's got more ammo, basically, is what it comes down to. She's just got more. She's got more stuff to come at the state, with to argue in the Court of Appeals. And this one's good. I mean, this one's really significant to me. I just don't see how the state, I'll put it this way. I am very interested to see the state, what slimy methods they use to try to wiggle out of this. I'm actually very curious to see what the state's going to do about all this here.
I think she's going to get an evidentiary hearing.
You think judge is going to? You think Second this is going to give it to her?
Yep.
Maybe if nothing else, just because 15,000 signatures.
I think 15,000 signatures is pathetic.
Yeah, I don't think that she'll even know about it, let alone care about it.
Yeah, well,
I think the Court of Appeals,
I can tell you what, I don't think there's many judges out there that could get 15,000 people to sign anything about them. But
15,000 people that don't live in your state. She doesn't care.
Well, that's true.
I think she's going to get the order. She's going to give the hearing is because of the reading because of some of the clear language in the order granting the stay and remand, and because of some of the things that are in between the lines of that order granting the motion to stay and remand.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm going to think it, but when we get to the the steps, it's 4 easy steps, and whenever we're ready to go through that, take about 1 minute to explain it. It's real simple, but I think she's going to get an evidentiary hearing.
Right.
Could be wrong. Could be like the computer disk and gets denied outright without a hearing. But I think she's gonna get an evidentiary hearing on it.
So let me ask you this, Tracie. In Wisconsin, how common is it for an appeals court to remand something back to the circuit court?
Well, okay, this is one thing. I know Kathleen said in her tweet that it only happened 2 times. It's not true. Okay, it's happened more than that. Okay, I don't know why she said that. It's happened more than that. It is rare, but it's only rare because it's rare for there ever to be a request like that.
Mm-hmm.
I do not think I'm going on a limb to say 99.9% of appellate cases are not still in a fluid investigation while you're presenting your petition for post-conviction relief.
Right.
That doesn't happen. I mean, it just doesn't. Usually it only happens where you request a remand if some new law has been, like what happened with the Brady, rule, and that just happened with our
Right.
Supreme Court recently. If somebody had a Brady claim that they didn't file because they the due diligence, whatever, and then all of a sudden the rule changed, then they might ask, can I remand it back to present now this Brady claim now that the law has changed on it? That's a situation where it would normally happen. It rarely happens where because usually you present your post-conviction petition for post-conviction relief after you have the newly discovered evidence, not while you're still searching for it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's rare from the respect that, yes, it doesn't happen all the time, but it's rare because, like I said, it's not requested that often. And most people don't have a reason to ever need to make that request.
Right.
So no, it doesn't happen often, but I can't speak to how often it has happened once it's been requested.
Well, let me ask it this way then. Obviously, there's probably been at least one or two cases in Wisconsin where there was a fluid investigation going on during the appeal. Has there ever been two remands in one circuit court appeal? Or I'm sorry, in one court of appeals?
I honestly would not know. I
Not
said,
sure.
I don't think there's not a lot of cases where it's happened.
Right.
Again, I have to think that a lot of cases where it hasn't been requested either. When I searched for this at the time, there just weren't many. There weren't many cases where it was ever even came up whether it was denied or not. I mean, it just doesn't happen a whole lot. Because I mean, honestly, it's not common at all. I mean, because usually most people don't file a petition for post-conviction relief until you have everything. It's very rare that you would be 13 years after a crime was committed that you'd have this strong of an ongoing investigation going on. And it's very rare that you'd have a situation where a lawyer would be,
probably very rare that the state comes and hands you a piece of Brady evidence right after your motion for post-conviction relief gets denied too, right? That's probably kind of a rarity, I would say.
There's a lot of rarities, right? I think, in this case, but it's also very rare that you'd have an attorney that's involved in a case that would then tweet something, and because of that tweet, get new information, sent to them. I mean, so there's just a lot of things with this case that are very unique that I've never seen happen in a case before. Obviously, in the Adnan Syed case, same thing happened though. Serial came out, and all of a sudden they realized that there was an alibi witness that they didn't even know about because the judge or the lawyer never called her, and they were able to ask. The judge had already denied. In that case, the judge had already denied his post-conviction motion. They were in the Court of Appeals, and then they asked to remand it back to present another supplemental motion because of this new alibi witness. It was granted, and his conviction was overturned later during an evidentiary hearing by the same judge who had originally denied his original petition. Of course, this week we found out that now the highest court overturned that, which is stupid. But in that case, it's very similar. How new information came to light because of media attention, and because of so it happens. It's definitely happened before in different cases. That was in Maryland, but still, it has happened when new information comes out. It's just not common.
So, folks, if you're not familiar with that case that Tracie just mentioned, that's the subject of a 4-part series on HBO. The first part just aired yesterday, I think. Unfortunately, HBO doesn't let you binge watch. You gotta.
Yeah, it's over 4 weeks.
I think you actually can.
Can you?
Well, I don't know. Well, it's been out already, right? Or
no. They only released one episode.
Oh, this is new. Okay.
Yeah.
No, it's brand new.
It'll be shown over 4 weeks.
Everybody, when you have time, whether you record all 4 so you can binge watch in a month, but you need to watch this series. It's a high school kid, Muslim, dating a high school sweetheart from originally from Korea, and all kinds of issues about forbidden love and Romeo and Juliet, and again, covered by the Rolling Stone author, reporter that we've talked about before, that's extremely reliable in her reporting. This is a big case of hers that Rolling Stone's covered really well. Started in a podcast, like Tracie was saying, and his cousin had gone through law school and graduated from law school, and she put all of the materials together and got it to this podcast host of cereal, and they picked it up, and then next thing that happened was it garnered a lot of interest and started a post-conviction process, and roller coaster ride. But I saw the first episode, and like most things that HBO does.
Is it called Serial or is it called something different?
The
It's
podcast
called-
is called Serial, but the
The
show is the case against Adnan Syed.
Okay,
Yeah.
so on HBO, folks, it's a case against Adnan Syed.
Yeah, and the misconduct in that case at least rivals this case. At least rivals it. In some cases, even worse in some areas, but yeah, it does. But anyway, so didn't mean to throw you off there, but I was just pointing out that, you know, that's a case that new information came to light later on because of media attention.
Right. Okay, so to get back to what I was saying earlier, to answer Ziggy's question, how long does the state have to respond?
Okay.
It's not a question of how long
No.
the state has to respond. It's a question of whether they respond.
This is how it works. Okay, this is different than a normal motion because this is still a petition. This is still part of the petition. When you file a petition, the judge does not have to get a response from the other side if she is going to deny it. But she can't grant it without hearing from the other side. The state can respond even if they want to, but the judge doesn't have to consider it unless she's asked for that response.
Mm-hmm.
The last time on the CD issue, the state informed the judge they were responding. She didn't request it. They informed her they were responding.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why she wasn't under any obligation to consider it or read it, because she didn't have to, because she was already going to deny it based on the merits of the supplement itself.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, she, you know, I hate to use the word has to, or the phrase has to, because obviously we know this court, but she has to get a response from the state on this one, because there is no way that she can properly evaluate whether there was any type of violation without hearing from the other side and them explaining themselves. Now,
Right.
in the CD issue, as I said, the state notified her they were going to file a response. I would not expect that to happen in this case. Okay. I am
they're cowering
thinking,
in their little hidey holes
yes,
right now.
I am thinking the state is going to take their chances and pray that she denies it without requesting a response from them. I can't see them wanting to voluntarily deal with this issue at all. I could be
obviously,
wrong.
from the way that they've answered it previously,
Right.
they've not touched or addressed the merits of it or anything, or, you know.
So that's just my impression, is that I would not count on them actually wanting to respond to this unless they are forced to by the judge. Once the judge asks for a response, she will set the schedule. So she will decide whether they have 14 days, 30 days in order to respond. So it'll be up to her. Kathleen only got 14, so she might only give them 14. But it's really at her discretion.
Right.
A decision, last time the Court of Appeals ordered there to be a decision within 60 days. They did not do that this time.
Right.
But by law, I guess you could say,
Supreme Court rule.
By Supreme Court rule, she has to rule within 90 days.
Mm-hmm.
Unless there is a reason she needs more time. Again, this is at the judge's own discretion that she can take longer if she needs to, but there's no reason she'd need longer for the 90 days for a supplemental motion. She only took a little over 90 days to do the whole petition before, you know.
Right.
But she's supposed to respond within 90 days. I would say 60 is probably a pretty good guideline. Whether she orders an evidentiary hearing, again, as you know, I kind of agree with Travis from the respect that she should. That doesn't mean she will.
Right.
Because there's no way that they can address in their response all the people, you know. I guess they could get affidavits from Kratz, they could get affidavits from the Hallbox, they could do that. But I think that it's going to take more than just a response on motions, you know, to decide this. So she should be ordering a hearing. That doesn't mean she'll rule in Steve's favor. Like I said, statistically, it's against him as far as getting a positive ruling.
Mm-hmm.
Let's clarify one thing right now that's just been a huge misunderstanding by a lot of people that comment about this case. Has the Court of Appeals ordered Judge suck at this to hold an evidentiary hearing?
No,
Okay.
no. She's been ordered to conduct any proceedings she feels necessary after the supplemental motion has been filed.
Right.
So
it's no different than what happened with the CD.
exactly.
Same
That's
wording.
why I was confused that people were so like, or I was confused why other people were confused, because to me
I was
it's the same
confused to see
situation.
Zellner saying it.
Yeah.
I was like, Jesus, KZ, we've just gone through this before.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, it's the exact same situation with the CD. This is different with the respect that, again, I don't think it's as cut and dried, because it was cut and dried with the CD issue because of the case law on Brady. I mean, that's why the state was eager to respond, because the law was on their side on that one. That might be different now with the new Supreme Court ruling, but but then, it was on their side. The law is not really on their side on this one. Or like I said, I don't think they're anxious to address this at all.
Right.
I think they're,
Right.
especially when they have the option of just waiting and saying, hey, maybe she'll just deny it and we don't have to deal with it.
Right.
I mean, that is an option for her. So I don't think she'll do it in this case. If she does, then yeah, that, is like, then that judge is definitely not on the up and up. And I don't say that lightly. Everybody knows I don't say that lightly, ever.
Mhm.
There's definitely something wrong if she doesn't at least order a response from the state.
Yeah.
So,
Folks, she's laid out the steps. And then Julie Pom, if you can put on your website and, link your website again. And if you can somehow get a link or post Wisconsin statutes 974.06, and you pull that up and you start at subparagraph 3, it provides the steps. Unless the motion and files and records of the action conclusively show that the person is entitled to no relief, it's their language, not mine. It's kind of awkward.
Yeah.
Conclusively shows is entitled to no relief, the court shall. So that's what happened on the computer disk. The circuit court held that what was submitted conclusively showed that Kathleen was not entitled to relief on the computer disk. So unless the court finds that the conclusively shows that the person is entitled to no relief, the court shall, A, first step, cause a copy of the notice to be served upon the district attorney, who shall file a written response within the time prescribed by the court. So that's exactly what Tracie said. Might be 14 days because that's what Zellner got, but totally up to the judge. B, that talks about if the person does not have a lawyer. Obviously, Stephen has a lawyer, it doesn't apply. C, grant a prompt hearing. D, determine the issue and make findings of fact and conclusions of law. Those are the 4 steps. And the judge is in control, the circuit court judge is in control of all of those timeframes, subject to Supreme Court Rule 70, what was it, Tracie? 70?
oh gosh, I don't remember.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
You told me to remember and I forgot.
There's a rule out there that says a court on any matter, one, they have to provide periodic updates to the chief judge of that district, what's going on with their cases, and it provides that they'll decide any matter once it's been submitted. Now, I'm not exactly sure in Wisconsin what they consider submitted. We'll get to that. I'll dig into that and work with Tracie on that, unless she knows the answer right off the top of
Yeah,
her
it's just
head.
when they're saying once each side has had the chance to submit their motion, the motion and the response. Once that's submitted, she has 60 days or 90 days to respond. And it's Rule 70.36.
Okay, so, and then the judge, if the judge feel they need more time, because maybe scheduling the evidentiary hearing or whatever, they don't have to ask for permission. They just notify the chief judge of that chief judge or presiding judge, Tracie? Chief
The
judge?
chief judge, yes.
Chief
the
judge of that district that she's in. Do we know who that is, by the way?
Yeah, Barb, oh gosh, I forgot her name. It's Barb something.
That's way better than, I'd even know. That's why it's so nice to have Tracie here on this local knowledge.
Chief Judge Barb.
She just sends an email to Barb, whatever her name is, and says, I need more time. And then but it is tracked. So it's not going to fall in a hole. Now, the Court of Appeals, there's nothing that says there's a rule on them. That Supreme Court rule we just cited says it doesn't apply to appellate courts. They can let it linger as long as they want, but she's under time frames. And I know there's been some concerns about, well, will the judge just bury this? And, no, we can assure you that will not happen.
Right.
It may take some time, and we'll just have to wait and see how it goes.
Barbara Key. I knew it was a short name. I just couldn't come up with it. Barbara Key is Key. Judge Key is the chief judge.
I've got another question for Tracie.
Almost
like barbecue. Anyway.
Tracie, you live in Wisconsin, right? That's no secret.
Yes.
What are you going to be doing April 2nd?
I will be voting.
Oh, wow.
I will be at the polls voting.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yep. Exercise your vote, folks in Wisconsin.
I should mention one thing is that there is always the very slight, teeny tiny chance that this judge, since she seems to love this kind of ruling, could try to say that he's procedurally barred from presenting this. It is the tiniest possibility, but there's arguments that could be made for that. So I just want to mention that would be the one really bad outcome is if she says he's procedurally barred.
Who says that?
If Judge Suckowitz rules that he's entitled to no relief because it's procedurally barred.
The Bones issue?
Yes.
Well, all right. Let's see if that happens because
I know
if it does. I know I'll be freaking fit to be tied.
Yeah, because you
won't be able to shut up my YouTube channel up at that point.
This has all come about because of documentation that already existed. It was already there. She just didn't have it. And an argument could be made that she made no motion for post-conviction discovery.
Could see Judge suck at this.
Yeah. She made no motion. Kathleen made before she filed the petition, she should have made a motion for post-conviction discovery, and then she would have gotten all of these things from the state. And since she didn't make that motion, they could say, well, she's procedurally barred. But again, I doubt it. But I'm just want to put it out there so that people know that it's a tiny possibility. I think that it would be.
I'll put it this way.
Judge.
If she said that, and it goes back to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals could undo it, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah. No matter what, this is going back to the Court of Appeals.
Yeah.
If she approves a hearing, if Steve wins at the hearing, his conviction is overturned. No matter what, this is going back to the Court of Appeals.
Even if it's the state repealing it, right?
Yep.
Absolutely, right.
Yep.
Okay, so I think we've thoroughly gone over this. I guess I'll ask for questions.
Well, you're getting questions, and just to clarify, they're expecting a voter turnout on these judicial elections. They're historically low, but the number is about, and Tracie, if you want to add to this, about 17 to 20%. It's not, under 5. I may have misspoke and said 2% when I meant 20%, or maybe Erekose did, or when I was explaining it to Erekose, maybe I said 2%. It's historically, 15 to 20%, which still means every vote counts much more than it normally would when you have 70 or 80% turnout, which you typically do in a presidential cycle. And so when instead of having 80% show up, when you have only 20, that means 10.01% of the people who turn out determine who wins whatever race it is. And so the factor of how influential your vote is goes up the lower the turnout is. I know this is rudimentary for a lot of people, but we're trying to make the point that it's important, regardless of where you live, regardless of what side of an issue you are on, that it is important for you to turn out and vote. And Judge Angie did not have an opponent when she ran last year in the judicial election. Right. And so she got elected to a new term by default. And so it's important to have well-qualified judicial candidates, and it's important that you vote, even if it's just judges on the ballot. And again, I think all three of us are pretty adamant that we're not going to discuss in a public forum who to vote for. That's your right and privilege to make your own determination, but we'll help you get educated if you're in Wisconsin. As Tracie advised me, Wisconsin has very liberal, not small L, not political, very liberal election laws. You can register to vote the day of the election if you have the proper identification. I think they require photo ID and whatnot, but if you live in Wisconsin or you know somebody that lives in Wisconsin, we hope that you'll take the time. And we realize the weather can be horrendous and it can be hard to turn out, but we hope you will educate yourselves about who's running for Supreme Court justice in Wisconsin, because it's ultimately going to get there. Somebody's going to file a petition for the Supreme Court of Wisconsin to hear this case. And, we hope you'll educate yourselves, make your vote count, show up and vote. But I'm off of my soapbox on that. Did you find some questions, Erekose?
Yeah. So, can Casey bring up the Kratz press conference in a new trial if that were to happen? And would it be fruitful, I guess?
That would be a pre-trial motion. That wouldn't be during the trial.
Okay. And what would they file?
Well, it would be just like before, where they filed that it was impossible for Steve to get a fair trial because of that press conference. Okay. I doubt she tried again because, whatever. But I mean, but yeah, because I mean, that press conference was fresh when they tried to get it thrown out the first time, or said he couldn't get a fair trial the first time. This has been years, so everything else that has been, all the other media and everything, has probably had a lot more effect than what that press conference did now. So
I guess I can see that reasoning.
Yeah, so I doubt that it would be brought up again.
The way it would be brought, I agree. The way it'd be brought up really wouldn't be a motion that which they've filed and tried and denied, that can't get a fair trial. It'd be hooked into a motion to change venue to get it moved to somewhere like Madison or Milwaukee. It would be used in a motion to get a jury questionnaire. It would be used to get voir dire individually rather than in a panel. So it'd be like how they do death penalty. We voir dire one juror at a time so they can't poison the other 60 or 80 or 100 potential jurors that are in a room. But that's a great question, whoever asked it.
Right.
It's not going to be the direct motion that you should dismiss the case. She may try. It's going to be denied again. But then as a compromise, she may get all these other goodies. Okay, we're going to move it to Wisconsin, where there's going to be less chance that people have heard about it. We're going to do a jury questionnaire. We're going to do individual voir dire.
Right. Okay. I've got a question. Will judge suck at this report back to the same COA judge that remanded it? Would assume the answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, they don't really report. She does a written decision, and then Kathleen they've set forth all of the deadlines. She has a standard amount of time to file a notice of appeal. She has strict deadlines on how quick she has to order transcripts. And, I don't want to be presumptive. The same would be true for the state. if she wins her motion, is granted a new trial, the state under has the right of appeal. They have so many days to do their appeal, and I believe the order granting the stay and remand, it applies to both parties. In fact, I'm almost positive on that, on how many days they have to order the transcript. But they don't really report. They author a decision, and then it goes back up.
Okay. Falcon has asked to have a question answered. Hold on, let me find something from Falcon that isn't retracted. It's no wonder I missed it. Hello, Justice. I see that. Well, hello, Falcon. Right on. Okay, I can't waste any more time on that. Sorry. Let's see here. What do we got?
Henry, Justice is here. Come here, Henry.
Is the case going to be?
Henry was over here earlier looking for Justice, but I hear Justice has been hanging out with her dad.
Yeah, she's been real quiet tonight. Usually she's barking like crazy.
Okay, is the case going to be ping-ponged back and forth from COA to circuit court indefinitely? No.
No.
But it could be ping-ponged back for the next 3 to 5 years. It just depends on how these things get ordered. She could lose here, go back to the Court of Appeals. Court of Appeals could say, you know, you should have had an evidentiary hearing on the computer disk. It's going back down. They could decide, no, you should have had evidentiary hearings on ineffective assistance of counsel. Yeah, it can be ping pong. So put on your big boy britches, and this is how post-conviction stuff works. If you're looking for a quick answer, this isn't the case to follow. You know, get it when the book comes out in 20 years. Watch this documentary on HBO and look at the progress of that case. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the appeal is gearing up, and it's very positive that we're moving forward, and we've had positive rulings. We've had a real good decision out of the Wisconsin Court of Appeals on Brady, a revolutionary state. But gear up and brace yourselves. If this is not the type of case you're interested in something for 6 weeks, these are the types of cases where you need to gear up and be prepared for the long run. And Kathleen has put this in tweet after tweet after tweet, what the average amount of time is for an exoneration.
Right.
And we haven't even hit it. She's been in the case less than 3 years.
Right.
It's going to take time.
Yeah, absolutely.
2 to 5 years is my prediction. If Kathleen wins her motion tomorrow, minimum 2 years for Stephen to get out. 2 to 5, but is what it's going to take. Just prepare yourself for it. I don't know if Tracie has a different viewpoint on that. We get asked that all the time.
No,
how long is this going to take?
I told people the same thing. I said that even if everything goes Steve's way, it could be about 2 years probably before he'd get out.
Right.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to have to tell people that, but I think it's just better that up front, and maybe this isn't the type of movement that you want to be interested in. But Erekose and Tracie, you guys have been covering this for going on 3 years already.
That's
over
3 now.
Yep.
Since 3 years and 2 months for me.
And you're looking at least
the very beginning.
And you looked at least 2 more, and my hat's off to you, sincerely.
Well,
I read everything after MAM1, and then followed Brendan's case religiously, it's a roller coaster ride, but this isn't the type of law for attorneys that like a lot of cases and a lot of action. That this is, you got to be in for the long haul. And if you're a supporter and want to be informed, you need to be prepared that you might need to be in it for the long haul, which is
that's why I've always told everybody here, I've said this many times on my channel. Look, if I understand some of you may lose, it may be hard for you to remain interested every day, all day for a few weeks, months, years, or whatever. So I advise you, pace yourself. You know where to come to find the information. Okay. Also, Tracie, you can come to Tracie. Great. You can find her Facebook group. You can find there's people out there where you know where to come, and you know that you can get information about the case and keep yourself informed without having to be quite as intense as we are, obviously. So it's, we try to create a way for people to stay informed with, without it having to be having too much of an impact on their life. You know what I mean? That's part of what I'm trying to do. And I think Tracie as well, with her legal knowledge and everything of, specifically there in Wisconsin, same thing, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But, so that's what we're trying to do. So like I said, for those of you who, realize that it's just not in your wheelhouse to be as intensely focused on this as some of us are, just remember where to come. We're here looking into it. We'll be able, whenever you decide to come back and find out what's going on, we'll be here to tell you. And remember to keep spreading the word, keep directing other people towards us, keep helping other people get educated. Don't send them to Newsweek. Don't send them to all these other fake news places. Dude, don't send them there. Send them to the right place. Anyway, I think that's about it for today.
Just real quickly, I've seen, without a doubt, both of you. I really commend you for being in it for the long haul, but I've seen both of you, people pop up and they haven't been around in a month, 3 months, 6 months, because life and other stuff going on. And right. You both welcome them back in with open arms.
Yeah, it's like an old friend.
And yeah, we're going to get you up. You both, we're going to get you up to date, and we're going to get you accurate information. And this is where we're at. And, pick right up where you left off. And so just know that if you do need a break, from my personal observations, both of these people are going to welcome you back with open arms.
Hi, Scott Ferris. I'm not sure what you mean, but nobody's bashing supporters here. And also, with that comment, let me make one thing straight. I do appreciate the fact that Newsweek and some of these news agencies just talking about it absolutely creates awareness, and I'm absolutely ecstatic for that. However, my concern is that because they are a big news agency, people think that they're accurate. Well, that's where I have a little bit of an issue with them. They weren't quite so accurate. So like I say, people, just find your trusted sources, find out where you can go to get the real story of what's happening, wherever that may be. Obviously, support the Newsweek articles, the WBA, whatever it is that comes out about the case. Support that, spread it around or whatever. Create the awareness, but just remember, they're not always right. They're not always accurate. That's my main point. Not trying to bash Newsweek so much. Just, be careful, folks. We send it, folks, here. Big jump.
Well, while you're finding the next question, let me just put that in perspective. So think about for a second a headline that Newsweek had, and think about how much time Erekose and Tracie have to spend responding to people. They're faithful subscribers, followers, whatever they're called. And I know it's intense because I get direct stuff. And when's Stephen getting out? Newsweek said Kathleen won her appeal.
Right.
And so you have to look at it from their perspective, that they're trying to get accurate information to literally thousands of people if you look at their subscriber numbers. And yeah, it's good that there's more and more awareness. It's great that Rolling Stone is covering this accurately. It's great that Newsweek is finally getting some more interest in this. Not so great that the Sun in the UK, the Rag, is talking about old news. But you have to, Tracie and Erekose have lives and day jobs and families and
No, I don't have a life. Everyone knows that.
and dogs and
Just saying.
I don't have kids, if that's what you meant by family. But anyway,
it burns time having to. I don't mean to put words in either of your mouths.
No worries, buddy. I was just having fun.
I've seen what you all have had to answer because of headlines like that. Tracie and I joke about it. Yeah. And she vents to me once in a while saying, "Oh my gosh, you don't know how much time it's going to take me to stamp this one out."
Hey, that's why when I get the 30 messages, when an article like comes out like that, and as I'm at work during the day getting 30 different messages asking me, "Oh, is Stephen getting out?" That's when I go, that's when I go, not answering you guys. Video later.
Yeah, and I think that I said it's headlines like this that make my life hell. I mean, it really, because then everyone gets confused. Everyone has like so many questions, even more than they normally do. And I don't fault anybody for that, because they're reading things that they have no idea aren't true, but it's like, boy, that can make my life just complicated when they put a false headline or a misleading headline, and everyone else can maybe just blow it off. But for me, it's like, oh God, please don't do that to me.
Right. For those of us that get messaged by people, lots of people.
100 people, 1,000 people.
It's like pulling your hair out. So anyway. All right.
I didn't mean to interrupt find a question for Tracie. It's so
I'm good.
Wonderful that we have her here. Let's.
I want to say to what Erekose was saying before about being involved in this case. I mean, I certainly have had moments where, for my own mental health, I wish I could step away. Because, like you said, sometimes it is just overwhelming and it's frustrating. But I've gotten to know Steve. I'm friends with Steve. As hard as it is for you guys, and as frustrating as it is for you guys, I have to see it, in him, the pain, the frustration. I'll even get choked up talking about it. I have to hear it, in his voice, and that's what keeps me going. Even on days where I do want to just kind of throw my computer out the window or whatever. It's like, it's nothing compared to what Steve has to deal with. And Steve is a very good-natured guy in general. He likes to laugh. He has a really good attitude most days, but trust me, it gets to him. And when it gets to him, it gets to me. We talked about Ma'am too, when we talked about his parents, and I told him, I yelled at him for crying because on there, like getting choked up on there. So I'm like, because you made me cry. Don't make me cry.
Right.
And it's this thing, it's like, and it's hard. I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only one watching Ma'am too that got choked up, hearing Steve get choked up about his parents. But I experience that a lot more often, being close to him. And man, it's killer some days. It's a lot to even have to process some days about what he has to go through and what he's been through and for how many years he's been through it. And that's why it's important to keep going and to keep people active and keep people interested. And, that's why it's so important to me, is because, he needs it. He needs the support from us.
Okay, this is the last question, folks. So
Wait
just
a minute.
so
I
you
just see.
understand, Travis, this is
Wait,
the last question. I have
Yeah.
to end this live soon, otherwise something's going to happen that hasn't happened since I was 5 o'clock or 5 years old. So, all right, last question.
Hey, go ahead, step out, and mute so you can't hear what Tracie and I say about you. But
Yeah, right.
feel free to step out.
Hey,
Let the monkeys take over.
I gotta let. Nope. I don't. Only Paul Capaldi can watch the helm while I'm gone. Anyways, Vanessa Overton asks.
That's
And I think
probably a good move.
this is a
on
question
your part.
probably many people that don't know might like to hear. I know a lot of people here do know. But Tracie, what are your qualifications? There are so many different rumors of what they are.
I do not know how there are any rumors about this. Like,
Right.
it's actually in the description of my
Facebook
my Facebook page. Like, I could not be more clear about this. I'm not an attorney. That's why it's a joke. The title is basically attorney. It's like I'm not an attorney. My major was criminology and law. My background was in criminology and law. I went to Marquette University. Yes, where Ken Kratz went, not at the same time.
Then all you have to do
It's
is
a
go back and
great-
graduate. You don't even have to pass the bar.
Yeah, that's the thing is that, like, I took classes at the law school because I enjoyed the law, but I never registered as a law student because I didn't want to be a lawyer. So I didn't actually register as a law student, but I took probably 7 or 8 law classes, I think, at the law school. So, because people do that when they're bored, right? I actually worked. Yeah. I actually worked as a private detective for several years. So that's how my background was actually more in investigation than law, even though I had a good understanding of the law. But I got my understanding of the court system and of investigations and working with attorneys and working with police through being a private detective. And I did that for several years. And then just life happened and I kind of got out of it. And it's something that's always been a passion of mine ever since. And so I just kind of put my knowledge to good use once this case came along. You'll see that I'm kind of like a jack of all trades. My daughter is actually completing her master's degree in a couple months in medical legal death investigation. She has bachelor's degrees in forensic investigation and biology. So when I answer a lot of questions about like how forensic science and forensic investigation and she conducted her first solo autopsy this last summer. She works as a death investigator for ME's office. Any questions that around that, which are also in this case, I kind of go to her for that stuff because that's her area of expertise. So I kind of just have a lot of knowledge in a lot of different areas from either my own education, my own experience, and then my daughter's education and experience. And so we kind of just make a good team as far as covering a lot of the bases. So There you go.
Okay. I lied. I'm going to talk about one more thing. Russell Gatton. How can the state give away possible human remains without putting identification to them? How would they know where to send them? My answer to that, Russell, will be that they sent them to the Whiting Funeral Home, which gave them back to the hall box or buried them or whatever that ended up happening with them, putting them in a monument, whatever it was, right? So basically, how they put identity to them is who else's bones could they be? I doubt they actually did any testing. I think this is just proof that the state is proving that logic tells us that those are Teresa's bones. I don't think they actually did any testing to determine. If they did, they should have disclosed that too. So if they did do testing to determine those bones are Teresa's, they're hiding that too. And so I don't know that we'll, unless we somehow find out about that, which I doubt that. I doubt it ever happened. So basically, it's just their own logic. I hope that helps, Russell.
Good synopsis, Erekose.
All right, everybody. We are well over the 2-hour mark, and I think we've discussed this pretty thoroughly. You guys want to say goodbye to everybody?
Yeah. Everybody have a good night. Thanks for joining in. If you are not on Facebook or you didn't catch my video earlier, I haven't uploaded it to YouTube yet, but I will either tonight or maybe tomorrow morning. So I just go into a little bit more detail about some of the stuff, but I mean, we covered a lot of it tonight. So, but just to let people know that, because I know there's some people that are on Facebook, and if they're looking for my YouTube video, I haven't uploaded it yet.
Right.
I came right here
So,
afterward.
Yeah. So, food for thought. You guys can go over to Facebook if you're on Facebook and join basically a lawyer. That's Tracie's group, and you can see her video there, or you can wait till tomorrow and you can go to her YouTube channel after she's uploaded it there. Very informative. I advise anybody who's interested to go do so. Travis.
Thank you, Tracie, for all that you do and for joining us on an important legal filing. And it just never ceases to amaze me how you can take complex legal concepts like Youngblood and what you were explaining earlier in this video and make it so simple. Something it takes me 2 minutes to explain, you put in 15 seconds, and
I just talk faster. That's all.
Well, I just really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
I always enjoy what you do, and you and Mark now being conduits, I think is also a really nice thing that you do, that we have reliable conduits on what this is all about, and what the two people that are so affected by this are undergoing for years and years and years. And there's just no way to imagine it. You're unfortunate to have a family member or a client in that situation. And so I just really appreciate everything. And I'm for you to come over here for another 2 hours after doing a good hour and a half on your presentation. I just can't say enough. And Erekose, you already know what I think about you, but
thank you both of you for being here.
It's just great. And thank you for all of the supporters who tuned in, and great.
Yes, because it's you guys that kind of make this worthwhile. You guys are out there, paying attention, helping create the awareness. You guys are a big part of what this is about. So keep tuning in. To me, to Tracie, and to whoever else you like.
To everyone.
To whoever tickles your, fancy, whatever it is. So anyways, that's about it for tonight, folks. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see ya.